Okay, so I think people have started joining, and they will over time be there. So we'll just start. My name is Gildas Humano, and our today's conversation following our earlier last month we were having a conversation on coronavirus, and this month we are actually discussing it. I'm having some echo. But I think it's fine now. So we're having our discussion today about antimicrobial resistance and antimicrobial use, basically in the human and the animal health sector. And those who don't know what antimicrobial resistance is, it's when we are sick and the disease is caused by bugs, that pathogens that are known as bacteria most of the time. We usually get drugs that we call antibiotics, and these are what we know. For example, the case of penicillin, for the people who are out there who don't know what kind of what antibiotics are. We usually get these drugs to actually kill the bacteria that are causing the disease or actually causing infections in human or also in animals. But over time, we have noticed that there are some bacteria that have been developing resistance to these compounds, so they can actually resist killing, and the issue has become very serious to the point that from the one of the last United Nations Assembly, General Assembly, they even projected by 2050, if nothing, no action is taken, we could actually lose more people due to antimicrobial resistance than cancer and road injuries together. So we are gathered today with some very interesting experts around Africa, if not global leaders in the field of antimicrobial resistance, both in the livestock sector but also in the human sector. To quickly discuss, it's going to be like a 1 hour discussion to talk about what are the challenges and what kind of interventions can be done for antimicrobial resistance. And I'll just let the people introduce themselves. And I would like to start with maybe Kenneth from the way my screen is looking from low. Yeah, Kenneth, could you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Jodas. I'm Kenneth Chawinga. A veterinarian from Zambia, working with the government of the Republic of Zambia in the central province of the country. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Victorien, we would like to hear from you. And there is some dog barking behind you. We hope the dog is not going to attack us here. Yes, Dr. Victoria, can you please introduce yourself? Is he still there? I think he's frozen. He will,
I think she's muted.
no, he's not muted. Okay, we'll go to Ashley then. Yes, Ashley. I think Victoria will come back. He has issues with the internet.
Okay, so thank you very much, Gildas, for inviting me to be here. My name is Ashni Moodley. I lead the CGIAR Antimicrobial Resistance Hub that is hosted by the International Livestock Research Institute, and I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very nice. Yes, Victoria, are you back? Can you hear us now? We would like you to introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, okay. I'm Victorien Douillon. I'm a microbiologist at the University of Abomey-Calavi.
Okay. And Victoria is actually going to kind of represent mostly the topic from the human health perspectives, because he's been working in the human health sector for a while. So and yeah, and Kenneth is a veterinarian, but if you can observe, Ashley is actually going to be more like the one jumping on the tool, because she's basically the one health person here. But of course, we know all of us are one health related people, but yeah, she will be basically giving us most of the information from that side. So I would like to start quickly with Kenneth to kind of give us, because when we talk antimicrobial resistance, for some of us in the field of science, we already understand what it is. We know it, but people out there don't really understand, and some people actually understand, or some have different conceptions of this. So when we bring it down to the Zambian level, or also from, if we can say, African perception, what are the different perceptions that we have about antimicrobial resistance? If you could just tell us. Your microphone is actually mute.
Okay, thank you, Gildas.
Yeah.
Talking from the Zambian perspective, antimicrobial resistance, like the term itself, is so much widely used, but the context, if
Yeah.
you ask people what they understand by it, it is quite different. So people think the resistance applies to the human being himself, who's infected by the bacteria. They do not really grasp the concept that the resistance is a function or the property of the pathogen that is affecting or
Could
causing
you please
disease.
raise your voice a little bit?
Okay, so
Yeah.
the people take it, the resistance is actually
Yeah.
a function of the human being, the one that is not being infected, not the other way around, which is actually the case, that the resistance is actually the property or the function of the microorganism that is affecting us or that is causing disease in us. So it's actually the microorganism that is resistant to the chemicals that are supposed to kill it in the form of antibiotics, and not the human being. So because of this, people think maybe there are people that have got stronger immunity that won't be affected by antimicrobial resistance, and others that have weaker immunity are the ones that will be. So that is the general perception of antimicrobial resistance among the population.
So that's something I've never heard of before. Like people think resistance is actually an issue due to human immunity. It's not the organism.
Yes, yeah,
Wow.
exactly. Yes.
I actually, have you heard of that before? Like from the different health works you're coming with.
I think some people would see, sort of resistance as something that makes you sick. It's something you would get sick from and therefore could be related to the immunity. But I heard a funny thing yesterday that farmers or people use like they rub antibiotics onto meat as a way of decontaminating the meat, which is kind of crazy. But I think there are all these little kind of antidotes about how to use antimicrobials and what is resistance and the cause of resistance. I guess you've
Okay.
heard of all the craziness.
So that's that's a lot of different stuff. So rubbing the meat with antimicrobials is actually going to worsen the situation. It's not going to help. Yeah.
Well, from as a scientist, yes, we see it as it worsening the situation. But from the consumer or the person doing it, they see it
Yeah.
as reducing the bacteria. So we're making it safer.
Yeah. By the way, I will just jump on this and ask you to continue with what do you think then? Because these are one of the drivers, if I could say, of the resistance that we are having. So, as maybe a scientist, but also an outreach person in the field across Africa, what do you think are the main drivers for antimicrobial resistance on the continent?
I think for us, we need to, when we think about antimicrobial resistance, we very much try to think of what is driving use and then what is driving resistance. And then we try to link the two together. So for us,
Okay.
it's important to understand, well, use is driven by the fact that animals are sick, people are sick, or they have a perception that using antimicrobials is going to be some sort of benefit. So I think in low and middle income countries, the challenges that we face here in terms of high disease burdens in human populations, animal populations, coupled with very poor infrastructure in terms of access to healthcare, access to veterinary services, coupled with no surveillance, coupled with little to no diagnostic capacity. So you're not able to use antimicrobials in a very good way. We have a lot of culture, we have a lot of perceptions that we would have to change. But more than that, what we think is going to happen is that you're going to have rapid intensification of livestock production on the African continent to meet the growing demand for people wanting animal source protein. And because of that and the way things are regulated on the continent or not regulated on the continent, we think we will see unregulated use because people don't practice, don't have high biosecurity, not, doing herd health management practices. So you're going to have this increase of infections and therefore more antimicrobials. But over and above that, we know that antimicrobials are used as growth promoters. So as a farmer, you want the biggest animal, or you want, you know, the best milk. You want your animals to be very productive, and it's been shown that you know, low amounts of antibiotics can do that.
Yeah.
Now, coupled next to antimicrobial resistance is now you selected in a population so much resistance. This resistance is going to be sharing, because unlike in Europe, where we have compartments, where we have animals not necessarily mixing with humans. I mean, you don't go to a pig farm and live there unless you're the
No.
pig farmer. Whereas in
Yeah.
Africa, everybody, you know, you have
Yeah.
people living with their animals, so you have a lot more contact between all the different, you know, entities, animals, humans, the environment, and therefore you have more sharing,
Yeah.
coupled with poor sanitation, very many other issues, and so you're getting more spread. So I think that those are sort of the drivers of basically of infectious diseases on the continent that will drive usage and resistance.
So anything driving increased infection is definitely going to drive high use, and whenever we have high use, there will be associated with resistance.
Yes.
Okay. If I want to make this more into context, like I want to move to Benin, what is the challenges that Benin is currently having when it comes to antimicrobial resistance? If I don't know
Oh,
if that
thank
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. I think what Ashney said is the same thing here. You have the breeders; they are using a maximum of antibiotics to avoid any disease. And the situation is that, okay, if you are using intensive antibiotics, then you will face this rise of AMR. But especially in Benin, we have many challenges regarding this AMR situation. Firstly, I can say that we don't have any surveillance mechanism of the pathogens, especially those which are multi-resistant. We don't have a good mechanism of surveillance of those, especially this epidemiologic surveillance. And also the national statistics, not so well defined. And when you compare it to the socio-sanitary impact of
I would,
AMR,
sorry, I'm
you
not going to
feel that
interrupt you.
the
Sorry, I think I just lost him. I want, are you there, Victoria? I wanted to try to shift. Yeah. Can you hear me?
yeah, I hear
Yeah.
you.
No,
This is
sorry. No,
the
I just
network.
wanted to ask you to. I mean, the issue about the national action plan and issues related to the surveillance. We'll be coming to that in the next topic.
Okay.
But I wanted to ask you more about the drivers that Ashley and Kenneth just discussed. If we try to move it more into the human sector, like the human health area that you have been working with, what
Yeah.
are the main drivers in that sense? Yeah.
Yes, in the human side, the main challenges we have here has been a little bit solved since I think 1 year and some months ago, because in the past, people they buy antimicrobial outside the lines. So if you even when you have some problem which has nothing to deal with antimicrobial, people just rush and buy those antimicrobial. But since some time, I think the new government released some rules which prohibited the use of antimicrobial. If you don't have a prescription, you cannot get the antimicrobial, you cannot get the drugs. But I have, from my experience, noticed that it's not everywhere like that. You have some people who are still having the antimicrobials without any problem. Even for headache, they go to the pharmacies and they collect some drugs, some antimicrobials, and they just use it. So we have this problem with people. And those people, those problems come from the misconception of those people. They are not well educated. And especially when they know that antimicrobial resistance doesn't kill as other diseases. So you cannot take it today and die from that. So they don't feel well concerned. They don't say, okay, I just want to do it, so I don't feel the danger you are talking about. So that lack of awareness about AMR can contribute to that situation.
So if we grasp this well, it's mainly there's this issue about awareness, lack of awareness among the population. So there is
Among
a
the
serious
population.
work to do regarding sensitization, because people still have access to antimicrobials over the counter, and
And
I think that
even among the doctors and the young pharmacists, also the awareness should be there, because you don't go for antimicrobials as first intention. So, you know, if you work on hygiene, then you can avoid some infectious disease. But if the first idea is antimicrobial, then the medical doctor also have some problems to solve.
Oh, okay. We'll be soon, like after the next topic, we'll quickly let some people intervene in the conversation. Like I have seen Dr. Philip, and also have some people who wanted to talk. We'll manage and see how they can actually talk. I want to stay in that line with the conversation we are having, and then move to Kenneth and ask actually about these people being able to have access to antibiotics whenever they want and however they want. Is this actually related to the lack of existence or clear national action plan towards antimicrobial resistance? Your microphone. Your microphone, Kenneth, is off.
Okay. Can you get me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Am I
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
all
I
right.
can hear you now.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So on the issue of access
Yeah,
to antimicrobials, I think it's just as the situation is, just like Victorian is just from explaining. We have the
yeah,
action plan, the national action plan, and we have clearly spelled out guidelines on how to use microbials. In fact, we even have the law under an agency that is called Zambia Regulations, Zambia Medicines Regulatory Authority, and people are not able to get people are not supposed to get some kinds of antimicrobials over the counter. But then the presence of these agencies are just at the national level. It hasn't yet trickled down to the provincial level. It hasn't yet trickled down to the district level. And these are the levels where we find most use of the antimicrobials. We have got people opening these mobile shops for drugs right next to the farmers in the community, which are not regulated. So you'll find that for any ailment that their livestock get, they will go to the pharmacy, get megapen, get oxytetracycline, get all sorts of drugs. So it's just like, use of these antimicrobials on a trial and error basis. They inject it with Oxyject, it doesn't get better, they go back, get penicillin, they get back, get this other drug. So that is actually the issue. Then
so
also
yeah, go
coupled
ahead.
with that,
The national
coupled with
action
that is
plan, actually,
also, yeah. So our national action plan is there. It was, I think, established in 2017. It's
yeah.
there, and it's housed under the Zambia National Public Health Institute, under the Ministry of Health. So there we have, it's a multidisciplinary approach. We've got veterinarians, we've got medics, we've got environmental scientists, but then it's just at the national level. When we come to the provincial level, there isn't much. We come to the district level, there isn't much. So you'll find that the misuse of antimicrobials continues unabated. Yes, there are laws. Yes, there's an action plan, but then the intended benefits do not trickle down. Yes, yeah, exactly. So that's the situation.
I would like to move to Ashley about this, because the action plans, we know some countries have them, some don't have. Probably Victoria will tell me that Benin doesn't have an actual national plan. Maybe Victoria, do we have a national action plan to fight antimicrobial resistance? A clear one, or just some copy paste? Victoria, okay, yeah, maybe
I don't think so.
Yeah. Ashley can just continue. We'll come to Victoria later.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's interesting. We have a couple of countries, quite a few countries in Africa have developed national action plans. But I think one of the things, and I'm being very critical right now, is that it came as a drive from a global level with the WHO putting out a mandate that its member states or member countries should develop national action plans. And then came donors, FAO, USA, various donors gave money to the countries in order to develop the national action plan. And I think they did. And if you look at the national action plans, they're very closely match that is the global action plan. But now they have a very beautiful document, like a nice 40-page, 80-page document that they can say, look, I've done it. We've made a national action plan. I think the difficulty is now, how do we take that document and actually take it to the ground and implement all of the things that we need, that we say we will do in the strategy? And there is when things break down, is that it costs so much to implement all of those strategies.
So sorry, without interrupting, you feel like most of these action plans are just like, they just copied the global action plan and try to just show something?
I think the global action plan is so broad. The different action areas are very much linked to everything that we know about how to reduce antimicrobial resistance, awareness, education. It's about reducing usage in the agricultural sector, reducing usage in human sectors, surveillance. I mean, I can't find a national action plan that doesn't encapsulate the global action plan or the points of the global action plan. So for me, it's that, yes, it's wonderful that countries have invested in developing this plan. They have committees that sit there and review it. But the challenge is implementation of all of those activities. And I think that's where it breaks down. How are they going to implement it? And so what is this? I mean, it's a beautiful document. It says the right things, but I wonder how implementation is going to happen. And of course, you can't do it all, so you have to start somewhere. And so now you have Fleming Fund that is invested in developing surveillance systems in so many low and middle income countries, which is the great first step to developing a national surveillance system.
Yeah.
But when Fleming Fund ends, will countries be able to sustain this for the next, for the rest of its life?
I was actually going to ask you that later. But that's true. I mean, the flow is correct. Like, if we have national plans all over the place, and I think Kenneth put it clearly that they have this document at national level, but then it doesn't go down to any province, not even in the main cities anyway, because nobody is actually enforcing it. They did it just for the purpose of doing, probably maybe to even get this funding from the UN to show the document.
Because I think it's a good thing that people are looking at it and focusing on it. So people are talking about it. And most countries have very clear regulations, policies that state you cannot, sell antimicrobials without a prescription. There's a lot of laws that govern that. But the problem is, in Africa, very difficult to implement that against the backdrop of so many other challenges each country faces. How many people do you have human resources to go around and check everybody has the right documentation, certificates? Do you have quality control of the drugs coming into the market? Let alone those that are coming in through the right channels, but what about all the illegal trade that's going on and sort of things, coming through from porous borders? It's just impossible to regulate.
And a lot of bad drugs from India. I don't want to point. I mean, it's not just to talk about India, but there are always these issues. No,
They,
but
they,
yeah,
the
you were
other
saying
thing is
something.
that so sort of even the actual pharmacies, certain antibiotics have to be kept under refrigeration. They have to be kept away from sunlight. They have an expiry date. How many of those do you think really, when they pass the expiry date or they have not been stored properly, get thrown away? Or
No,
how many of those get sold still to unsuspecting people who just trust the pharmacist? I
yeah,
mean, I think there's so many. There really is so many challenges that one has to think about. So you can't. And I know we're going to talk about interventions. You can't just say one intervention and that's going to solve everything. It's a small process, lots of little baby steps until we get to be where potentially a high income country
yeah,
is.
and I hope we'll get there. But when we talk about lack of, I mean, implementation plan, because we always have these action plan, but they are not implementable. But I'm going to try to move towards the implementation, which is more or less like the intervention. So I'll move back to Victoria. What do you think should be done when we talk implementation? Of course, we need to spread it to different angles. We cannot just digest it all together, because there is implementation which can be surveillance. There will be others which will be more like bringing new drugs and etc. But when we take the first that we all know, like everyone needs to implement, so that we have a basic document to be based on to move ahead. That is the surveillance, because without surveillance you don't have data, and you cannot do anything without stepping on data. So what we know the challenges. We know the challenges, right? Let's not talk about the challenges anymore, but let's try to actually propose, okay, issue plans or interventions. When we talk surveillance, what do you think can be done in that sense, Victoria?
Yeah, thank you. The problem is actually real because, as Asne said, we also have a beautiful plan, 90 pages,
Oh,
a
by
lot
the way,
of.
do you have play plan in Benin?
Yes, of course.
Oh, okay.
We had our plan in 2018, I think, 18, and I'm a member of the panel of
You are a
this.
member of the national panel who developed the national action plan.
Yeah,
Oh,
yes.
actually, we should
So
put him on hit. Ask him all the questions.
no, but it's true. I think all the plan from Africa we took from World Organization of Health. So we define the actions, we define the activities, very well designed. For example, I think from our plan we have 5 axes. First one, we need to promote the fight against AMR. You say this is very beautiful. So there we have all the activity about awareness, communication on AMR, education, to change the mind, to change the behavior of people. The second axis is about surveillance and research about AMR. And there we have the surveillance as a first strategy, the capacity building of laboratory, and research and development. So this third axis is related to the prevention and control of infectious diseases. So there you have the health, human health, animal health, and hygiene and sanitation, you see. And in the fourth axis, it's about the management and the usage of antimicrobials. So how to use the drugs with a good way. And finally, the last axis is about the resources, how to do the mobilization of funds, the mobilization of and the coordination of those all those axes. So we try to put together many ministry of higher education, ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture and Breeding, and the Ministry of Environment. So we had panelists from all those ministry, and we wrote this action plan together. But the big problem is how to put in reality all those ministries together. Because what we have actually in the country is that each researcher, if you take the Ministry of Higher Education alone, each researcher wants to do what he can do from his side. We are not doing it together. But it should not be like that. We need to put all
But
the
environment made to facilitate people collaborating across
that's the
disciplines.
problem. That's the problem. Because if we don't collaborate, and you see me as a human biologist, and
Yeah.
you are in the health, the animal health, and you are
Yeah.
doing from your side. I'm doing from my side. The medical doctor, they are doing from their side. Nothing will happen. That is sure. Because if we put ourselves together to think about this issue, the way we will do it will be different. So
Sure.
the promotion of the One Health, and it's not only saying One Health in theory, just One Health in the book, One Health when we come to talk about it. No, it should be a One Health approach in practice, because we put everybody together and we want to solve this problem. And we can start from each compartment. If you take from the human health, for example, we've noticed that even in the hospitals, in our hospital, the usage of antimicrobial is not what it should be normally. So we can solve this kind of problems together. Secondly, from the same fields, when you go to a lab A, the way they test the antibiotics is different when you go to another lab in the same
So there is
country.
an issue with harmonization of testing.
Exactly. It should be the same panel of antibiotics we are testing. You see? Because if you are testing 5 antibiotics in an hospital, you are testing 6 or 8 in another hospital, the data can be merged at the national level. So we need to have a national algorithm so that we know that in Benin, if you want to test the resistance, you have this quinolone to be tested, you have this to be tested, and that's will be very good to get same results so that we can comment it together. Okay. Another issue is about the quality of those antibiotics we are testing, you know, because you can have a big rate of antimicrobial resistance, but it's not necessarily the situation, the real situation, because the disk that are being used in those facilities, if the discs are already discharged before testing, then you will say we are facing resistance, but it's not true at all. So we have also this problem that could be solved, and then we have interpretable, we have good result about the situation.
Okay. Yeah. That's quite detailed. And I want to move to Kenneth, then I will return to Ashley, because Victorian just brought up the issues about One Health and a bit of issues to be done, especially in the context of Benin for implementation. And when I move to Kenneth, is because first I wanted to split some issues, but I think it's better we take them all together. When we talk about interventions, it's mainly about surveillance activities, anything about research and surveillance of AMR. Training and education. This, of course, goes, as Victorian said, we should include also the medical doctors, because some of them are also not aware of issues with antimicrobial. So it's both the population, farmers, but also the medical people. Diagnostic capacity building. When we again listen to what Victoria just said, the issues about harmonization of protocols when we are testing, issues related to collaboration, probably vaccination as an alternative to therapeutic antimicrobials, and then the issues with I'll come back to that. Maybe that should be last intervention point, the alternatives to antimicrobials. But yes, Kenneth, I want you to take all about these 5 points to discuss the interventions that you guys are proposing in Zambia. You can unmute your microphone.
Yeah, so as Victorian has talked about it, though in great detail, in Zambia, the problem that is there basically is the problem of implementation. Yes, action plan is there, but implementation and monitoring become very difficult. The one thing why this is very difficult is that though we have embraced the issue of One Health on paper, in practice we haven't. And because of that, we are not using the resources optimally. For example, if we are visiting the farmers, I'm visiting the farmers today. Ministry of Health is visiting the same people tomorrow for health issues. The environmental technicians are visiting the same communities the other day for environmental issues. You know, we tend now to overload the same people because it's the same people that we are reaching out to. So overload them with a lot of information. They do not really know where to touch, where to start from. So I would rather, if we went the way of One Health in practice, we move, for example, if we go to see the people, because it's the same people that we are saving, we move as a team. The health expert talks about it from the health facet. The veterinarians talk about it from the vet aspect. The environmentalists talk about it from the environmental aspect. Then you find that even the intervention will be quite easy. The other aspect is, we can tell the farmers, for example, for the case of the veterinarians, you should not be using or misusing antimicrobials. But what's in it for them? Are they getting any benefit? Because they know even if I use or overuse my antimicrobials, or I jab the animal today, I slaughter it today, it will find itself in the human, food chain. The monitoring is not there. So incentives really for these people to adhere to these good antimicrobial use practices are not there. For the case of milk, there has been some achievement that have been done because mostly companies that go to buy milk from the small scale farmers who test the milk of antimicrobial residues before they buy it. And depending on the grade, that milk, maybe if it's grade A, it will attract a better payment than grade B, than grade C. So then farmers are careful there. Okay, on the dairy animals, I cannot use antimicrobials unnecessarily because I'll be caught and the grade of milk will be low.
So you now
and I'll
have
get
a grading
less money
system.
from it.
You have a grading system for the milk in Zambia, according to antimicrobial
For the
use.
milk, yes.
That's interesting.
Yes.
It's like the card,
So,
the red card system in Denmark, right? Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. So that's because we have got what are known as the milk collecting centers. So buyers will go there. That's where they will get the milk. So before they get it, they will So really, there has to be that the monitoring aspect, which is at the moment missing. The implementation and the monitoring aspect. There is no withdrawal period that is being adhered to. For example, for the case of
that's an important question. Yeah, the withdrawal period.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, how do you do for
like
the withdrawal period when it comes to poultry, like especially layers? How do you do for the eggs? Do you have a system for that?
For eggs, no, not yet. It's just the market and off they go to. We don't have any.
So a farmer can use an antimicrobial today and tomorrow sell the eggs.
Yes, the same goes for beef. And these farmers, there are times that we'll go into the field, we find this animal very sick, and when we ask the farmers, they tell us, oh, these people from the towns are coming to get even the carcasses that have been jabbed with the drugs. They're getting them, put them into their cold, these vans with freezers. Off they go to the butcheries, and the meat is sold.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, those are the gaps many that are there.
Okay, I want to bring it now a bit more onto the continental aspect. Ashley, what do you see that we should be doing more when it comes to interventions? Of course, with all the different aspects that it involves.
I think with interventions, we really need to understand what are the drivers of use and sort of what are the transmission pathways of resistance being able to transfer. So a lot of the things we talk about is behavioral changes. And as Kenneth said, if you don't have the right incentives, nobody's going to change their behavior. Why should they? So it's really firstly to try to understand what those incentives are. And I don't think we have quite hit the nail or figured it out yet. How do you trigger somebody, or how do you tell a farmer whose income is so closely linked to his ability to sell his animal, sell his milk, and if he doesn't sell it, that he will not get compensation for that. So everything is very much linked to a very tight profit margin for a lot of the farmers that we work with within the CG and at ILRI. I liked one of the things. So for interventions, I think if we want farmers to not use antibiotics, we need to give them something that is going to be just as effective as an antibiotic and if not cheaper than an antibiotic. Antibiotics are fairly it's one of, if you look at what a farmer spends his money on, it's mostly on the feed for the animal. Antibiotics is a very small amount of his income is spent on that. So it's cheap to buy an antibiotic dose. So if you want them to stop using antibiotics, you need to give them a cost-effective alternative, and an alternative that is not going to cause a dip in production. So you have to convince them of that. Vaccines, yes, by all means. I mean, we promote vaccines as a way of preventing infections. Anything that prevents an infection, be it the use of a vaccine, be it better biosecurity, better herd health management, anything like that will then reduce your usage as well. But the issue with vaccine is access to vaccines, price of the vaccine, using it correctly. I think that there are some other sort of delivery issues that people have. So, how many farmers have access to vets be able to call a vet and say, I have my animal is sick and can you come out to see them? How many farmers have money to pay for those kind of services? How many farmers can actually take a sample or can pay for a diagnostic test or an antimicrobial susceptibility test? So I think it's not just interventions as in we need to reduce use and we need to do it this way. I think we have to look at it very structurally and try to build everything, all the different levels. We need to have better access to veterinarians. We need to have better educated people. We need to have better drugs. We need to have some sort of quality control systems in place in order to do that. The other thing that I liked what Kenneth said is this One Health units. I think that now we're trying to see is that it's no longer we live in silos, and that we really, as you said, whether the medical doctor comes or the veterinarian comes or somebody else comes. So it's better to have these One Health units. And we have a project called the HEAL project, which is mainly focused in the pastoralists in Ethiopia, precisely to create these One Health units to deliver a One Health package of information to people. So I think we need to be, I mean, Africa and I'm African as well. As an African, we are inventive people. We can come up with ways that benefit us and suits our condition. So I think we have to take what has been done in Denmark, Europe, in America, and adapt it and give it an African flavor and make it work for us here. How? I don't know yet.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yes, that's the problem.
And
Because
I'm actually impressed. Sorry, I'm actually impressed that the Zambians were able to do this grading thing.
I think it's really great. I mean, I would like to hear more about it, Kenneth, in terms of how did you do that? So there was a project here trying to do that as well, looking at milk collection centers and giving certain milk collectors certification to show that, you know, my milk is a safe milk because look, I have this nice certificate here, so buy from me. But that actually failed in the long run because unless you can sustain the certification process, it makes it very difficult to keep the milk handlers or sellers incentivized to continue with the practices that they're doing. The other interesting thing is willingness to pay. So we sometimes think consumers have a lot of power because it's the consumer that can then drive a lot of the policies. Like in Denmark, is the case. Consumers are very important people.
Yeah.
But here, willingness to pay is a very interesting thing. So if you take people and you put them in a lab setting and you give them paper money and you tell them, this brand of product is very good, it's very safe, and this brand is not, which one would you buy? Or less safe or less better? They would choose the more expensive, what they think is the better brand. But when you go out in reality and they go back to their lives and you know, they go back to the stresses and whatever, you know, back to normal life, and when they're standing in a shop, they don't do that. They don't pay extra for the better quality thing. They tend to buy what they've always read based on how much money they have. So paper money versus real money, real life. So I think it's very complex thing that we have to think about. Social contracts as well. If you have a law, but if you don't trust the government, why should you follow the law then? You know, if you don't have a good social contract with your neighbor, why should you do something that is going to may not benefit you directly, but benefits your neighbor? So I think there's all of these social aspects that we need to tap into in order to figure out what interventions would be best for us. And I don't think in an African context, we need to be looking at AMR specific interventions, not interventions that are targeting for AMR reduction. We need to look at sensitive interventions. So interventions that are going to tackle many problems at the same time.
Yeah. So it should be more kind of infection level or maybe economic level, then you come down to solving AMR as a byproduct.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if people had access to better quality food, you'll solve malnutrition, but then they would also be healthy, strong, right? If they had better access to water, if we did not have raw sewage running through, you know, the streets, if that was, you know, in a sewer system, that would also help. So I think there are a number of things that we need to think of with AMR, that it's not just about AMR, it's about trying to deal with many other health challenges.
Okay.
It should be cost effective, I think.
Yeah, it should be cost effective. That's the other point. And that's actually why when we talk about alternatives to antimicrobials as one intervention is basically coming up these days, when we look in the developed world, people are actually more into alternatives to antimicrobials rather than other interventions. And on that point, I want to move to Victorien. He has been, I think, at least for the past 10 years, if I'm not mistaken, he has been doing a lot when it comes to alternatives to antimicrobials, and he's using medicinal plants. What can we learn from that, Victorien, in that aspect? And I know the whole University of Abomey-Calavi in Benin, about 80% of the research there is on plants. These people work on plants a lot. No wonder you are both country.
Because we are everywhere. We have a lot of plants, and from the social aspect, we have more than 80% of population which is still using medicinal plants to cure themselves. So you need to take this also into consideration. So we, from our researches, we go to those therapists, those traditional therapists, and ask them, okay, how do you use those plants to cure many infectious diseases. And the thing is that sometimes they have good success in the treatment, but there is no scientific data related. Sorry, my son is just spoiling my. So there is no scientific data related to that. So we collect the name of the plant from them. We compare it to the scientific knowledge, and then we test those plants. And recently, we got a project about the plant useful in the treatment of salmonellosis, especially those multi-resistant strain of salmonella. And we found some plants which were really interesting with a good potential, even in vivo. When we try to inoculate the bacteria to the poultry, and then we treat them, and we find some good potentiality, and it helped us to set up some phytomedicine in Benin. We call it improve medicine drug, improve medicinal drug, and we offer it to the population so that they can use it to cure this disease. But apart from the medicinal plants, I think another response can come from phages, because recently I have been introduced to phage, and I think from what I've seen outside when I was doing some internship, I think those phage can be another response, because the problem with medicinal plants is that, okay, finally it will lead to antibiotics, finally. And maybe in 10 or 20 years, we will still have the same problem we are having today with our molecules. But with phage, we don't have those problems, and some good experience worldwide ensure me that this is another way. And
No,
thirdly,
I think, yeah. Before you go, thirdly, I think even with the phages, you still have some resistance, and I'll go to Ashni for that
yes,
later, maybe.
yes, we still
Yeah.
have some resistance, but this can be another way to try to solve the problem, because we are facing a problem with many dimensions. So we don't. I'm not suggesting to focus on only one way to go through this issue, but we can have many options and look at all those options as good and great options. Yeah. And the last one, this comes from an experience I can share from a work we are doing with one of our partner. We want to develop a poultry litter management strategy based on an environmentally and economically sustainable solution, so that we can address the reliance on antibiotics in poultry production sector. So we are doing this reflection with a team of microbiologists and sociologists, so that we can inhibit pathogens and promote a low-cost poultry litter. I think the solution can also come from there. And we want to implement it with some pilot sites before opening it on all the farm involved in the. So it's a project we are dealing with some partner, and another way can come from there if we can manage the litter and show to the breeders that they don't need so much antibiotics, because there is normal there losses, and losses in poultry is deaf people. So if we can show them with the help of research that it's possible to avoid losses without using antibiotics, then we win something.
Yeah.
And that should lead the fight from there. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much. I wanted to go back to Ashni earlier about what's your view, and I'll come to Kenneth again. What's your viewpoint on the phage works going on and basically their application, okay, when it comes to use? Because the one thing is to develop them, the other thing is to actually effectively use them, and that goes back again to cost effectiveness and all that. And again, the issues with the plant works that people are doing from West Africa. How do you think all this can be centralized and to make sense from it?
I think one of the things that's important to think about at what level of development a product is. And all of the things that we're doing in the universities are pilot studies. They're proof of concepts. But by the time they get from proof of concept to where you can go into a store and buy it is a very long process. And during that process, if it's considered as an alternative to an antibiotic, when you do the sort of evaluations, the performance of a new drug, it has to be in relation to how an antibiotic is going to perform. So this was a very nice discussion we had with the guy with Zoetis about trying to understand regulation, how do new products come onto the market, and how do you show efficacy when you want to use it as an alternative to where there is an existing treatment already. So it's not so easy to take what we do in the university and then suddenly you have a product that you can mass use. So about phages, we received 1.5 million euros to do a phage project to develop a phage cocktail for poultry to treat colibacillosis. 1.5 million euros. And at the end of 3 years, we showed in an experimental model, in a clinical experimental model, that yes, out of the hundreds or so phages that we had and the different cocktails we produced, one worked.
Okay.
And it was the best one that. So initially we started off with 100 phages. We whittled it down to, I think at the end we had 8 combinations that were shown to be successful in vitro. And then we took it to an egg model. And then we showed that actually out of the 8, only 2 were good. And then we took those 2 into a clinical trial and only 1 worked. And now if we take this one cocktail into the field and under field conditions, what is the success there? And this is 1.5 million euros we invested in this project. At the end, we have a cocktail. And then what?
Then you are not even sure it's going to work in the field.
No, and so who's going to produce our phages at a big enough quantity, at a production quantity to use it in the field? So what pharmaceutical company? The University of Copenhagen is not going to suddenly start developing treatments. So I think we need to really try to understand, yes, they're all hopeful. They're really great ideas, and they've shown good data that it works under very controlled conditions, and in some cases also in real life settings. But to be mass, where you go into a pharmacy and buy it as a drug like you do antibiotics, I think we're still far away from that. But maybe on the African continent, with regulations, it might be different and will be country specific. Because in Europe, you have to go through EMA, the European Medicines Agency, and they have some very strict sort of guidelines of what drugs can be approved. And it's the same with the FDA in America. I mean, people have been working on phages for more than 100 years. Yeah. There's not one single product on the market for therapy. Not one.
At least not for the animal sector.
No, not for human sector as well. You cannot buy a phage for therapy. You can buy it for food and use it in food, but not for therapy. It really depends on how you classify the drug or product.
Yeah. So you mean even in the human sector? I didn't know. I thought we had phages in the field, in the pharmacy, where we can, for at least therapeutic issues in human.
Nope. Go try to buy it in Denmark.
Okay, so probably the same issue with probiotics. The probiotics are more.
I mean, probiotics, people spend a lot of money on probiotics. If you look into the literature and look for efficacy of probiotics, it's very much dependent on when you take the probiotic, how you take it, what is the combination, and you find conflicting data in the literature. So I think probiotics are great, but
Mhm.
my husband uses a probiotic every day religiously, spends a lot of money on it, and I don't because I don't believe in it personally. So I mean, and we're just doing a very big trial in Vietnam now, looking at a probiotic as an alternative to an antibiotic in pig production. I'll tell you in a few months' time if
I'll
how
I'll
does
tell,
that work.
I'll call you for that.
Yes,
Can,
call
can I,
me in a few months' time.
yes, Kenneth, do you have something to add to that? Before there's one guy tried to make a call. If you want to add something on that topic before we move to the call and another topic, is Kenneth there or he's frozen?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah. So maybe just adding on what Ashni has said. First, I think there should be this issue of incentivizing these interventions if they have to work, because we can put in punitive laws, we can bar the pharmacists from selling these prescription medicines only. But if there isn't anything, I mean, through the back door, these medicines will still find themselves onto the farms. So I think even the issue of testing the milk before you buy it, these are established organizations that are doing this. So if farmers don't see an incentive in it, they will simply take it to the market, to the informal market, and there are no tests, there are no nothing, and they are assured of getting something better than they would get when their milk is graded. So I think we need to take a holistic approach, not only focusing on the case of the antimicrobial use, but also on the issue of the social aspect, the economic aspect. Then we bring together these factors. I think we can be able to achieve much more in a fight against misuse of antimicrobials than just focusing on or banning the use of antimicrobials.
Okay. So
Really,
without. Yeah. Sorry, don't worry. We still have one more round of questions before we close the conversation. But we're having Martin who is calling. He wanted to contribute and probably he also want to ask some questions. Maybe. Yeah, Martin, you are on. Yeah, you can speak through my microphone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm hearing you.
Yeah.
But I think Kenneth is still speaking.
No, can you hear him now? Kenneth has stopped speaking. Can you hear him? Yeah, I can hear him. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's okay. I can intervene online. It's okay. Are you hearing me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Martin, and I'm interested in this discussion because I just completed my master thesis on this topic. So when I saw a discussion, I got interested. I thank you all for your points, and from your points, what I understood is that you mainly talked about 2 points, like on two sides of the emergence of antimicrobial resistance, like in human health and in animal health. And the point is that antimicrobial used in these two sectors are the main point giving rise to the antimicrobial resistance. I would like to add a third point. That is the horizontal gene transfer in the environment. Because even today, even we ban the use of antibiotic in both animal and human sector, the antibiotic resistance phenomenon will still be rising because of the transfer of resistant genes between resistant bacteria in the environment. So this point is really important, and I think we should take it into account while elaborating national antibiotic resistance, antimicrobial fighting plan, because the point is that we as human or as a researcher, we don't have any control of environmental transfer of antimicrobial resistance. So the situation is really dire on this side. I just want to add that to the 2 points you made earlier about the use of antimicrobial in animal health and in human health. The last point because I don't have too much minute, so that's about how to fight antimicrobial resistance.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, would you wait? I have Ashley would like to, and then Victoria. I think they want to answer you if you're still online.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the point that you bring up, Martin, and I completely agree with you. I mean, antimicrobial resistance is a natural phenomenon. It predates, if you look at prehistoric sampled permafrost from 30,000 years ago, you will find antimicrobial resistant genes there. But basically what has happened is that in the last 85 years, modern medicine using antibiotics has just basically increased the selection pressure of what we now see as clinical resistance. When we talk about antimicrobial resistance, we talk about clinical resistance. We're not talking about environmental reservoirs, but you're right, is that we will not be able to eradicate resistance. We will not be able to reverse resistance, but we need to manage it because it's there, and all use, whether it's rational use, misuse, will select for resistance. We just have to manage that. So thank you for that point.
Martin, yeah, Victoria, you can go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, Victoria.
I would like to. I agree with Ashley, but Martin is right. He's right because in Benin we got this collaboration with some Finnish partner, and it was about occurrence and sources and prevention of antimicrobial resistance. And these projects had a big part of environmental side. And what we saw show that the transfer from the hospitals, especially through waste water and those issues, is real in Benin. So it's true that we should focus our intervention on the hospitals, on the health system, but we need also to have an eye open to the environment, because we need to manage it, but at least the data related to the presence and the flow of the genes in those environments is important to be assessed. So this project helped us to give some inputs to our national plan, and I think from our side, the environmental side was really integrated, and it should be really taken into consideration to move forward.
Maybe we'll move back. Martin, do you have something to add, or we just keep it there for now?
Yeah. If you can give me 1 minute more, just to make my final point.
Yeah.
I agree with both of you, with Mr. Ashney and also with Dion. But what I would like to point out again is that environmental origin is really important when we look at livestock sector, for example, because livestock sector, animals eat crops from the environment, and there is evidence that crops can take up resistant bacteria from the soil, and then these resistant bacteria could be transferred to the animals and then later on end up in the human. Also, water we use for animal feeding comes from the environment. So giving these two important feeding points like water and crops from the environment, I think the environmental reservoir should be of concern as well, because all of we are talking about antimicrobial resistance exists and is being rising because resistant bacteria passed from animals to human, and there is evidence that most resistant bacteria in animals could come from environment as well. So that's why I was talking about that. So thank you very much for giving me the point, for giving me the floor in this discussion. I will be following you until the end of the discussion. And if I have any further question, I will write it down and you will answer me. Thank you very much.
Thanks. We are about to finish. I'm going back into the studio to ask the final round of questions. Actually, it's more about the future. Like if we look, like I think Ashley has said it earlier. It's the Fleming Fund currently, and then I know earlier this month there was also the AU that was ready to fund some projects for like a 3-month project to help people locally to develop these antimicrobial AMR projects. The question is, when we take specifically the Fleming Fund and probably that AU fund, both of them are going in the same direction, which is to get some surveillance studies on the plate. But what next? What will come later? Like if we are able to, we are very good as researchers in characterizing problems. We are very good at characterizing problems, but we are not good at solving them. So what should be the next focus? I want to take it from the person who is mainly working with policy stuff these days. Ashley, do you want to say something before I move to Kenneth?
I think there's a lot of initiatives and a lot of discussion is to move away from not focusing so much on quantifying the problem, but more looking at how do we solve the problem. And this is what ICOS, which is the Danish initiative together with the World Bank, is focused on implementation of interventions in low and middle income countries. Yeah. This is one of the first sort of major sort of efforts to look at solely focus on interventions. But there are a number of other sort of organizations, think tanks, global security organizations that are looking at, how do we deal with AMR and what can we do in order to solve that. The sort of the sadness that I feel is that COVID has come and sort of really kind of put a spanner in the works of many things now, because money has to be, it's investment, and it's usually big donors that are investing money. And so we're hoping that, there will be continued investment in AMR specific research, but also on sort of, taking research into policies is a very big thing. The other one is taking the policy implementation. So sort of focusing on how do we get to those points. And I'm hoping that, we will recover quickly after COVID, because COVID has put a stress on a lot of our systems and has almost kind of turned back some of the things that people have been doing and spending such a long time investing in Africa and Asia. So, I think there's now a focus really on interventions and how do we go from policy to implementation.
But we should not continue relying on more funds, because like what you said is we hope that there will be a continuous money being injected in AMR. But what will happen when the government do something?
I mean, countries, you're sort of at the mercy of countries that usually put up a certain percentage of their GDP for development aid. But if, they can't always, how much is a country going to continue to be investing? Some countries do it, other countries don't do it. So it's really difficult to say how much money is going to be how much money will be available in the future. And I don't think it's going to be just AMR only, like big $1 million projects. It's going to be a mix of many different, it's going to be zoonoses, it's going to be food safety, it's going to be packaged in different ways where you try to address multiple challenges.
Thank you. The same question, I would like to move with it to Kenneth before I go to Victoria. You just unmute your microphone. Kenneth, can you unmute your microphone and tell us if the Zambian government has any plan of self-financing AMR, AMU stewardship, both research and solution implementation intervention plans?
Unfortunately, there isn't yet. Everything that is coming in, almost everything in terms of funds that is coming in, it's donor funds, grants, and such things. So that is both at the action plan level, at implementation, and even at monitoring. So really, there's nothing local that is being pushed into this AMR fight, or even the use of AMU. Most of it is. And I think if we have to really win this fight, we have to win ourselves from external funds. We have to domesticate these solutions. Currently, we have, for example, an immunization program against East Coast fever. You know, East Coast fever in cattle is one of the diseases that causes a lot of mortality. So the Zambian government, I think we have got a grant from outside, where we are producing a vaccine in Zambia. But that one is highly subsidized at the moment. Yes, we are able to reach out to the farmers, but the program is still highly subsidized. The moment it rolls out into the private sector and they start charging the economic fees, I think it won't go any further. So I think the issue of sustainability has to come in if we have to win this fight.
Thanks. Oh yeah, Ashma was raising hand now.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment about that. So, if anybody hasn't looked at the global AMR hub, they have a dashboard to try to show where has been the economic investments in AMR at a country level, who has made the investment, how much, and in what specific area. And I was looking at human health. At a global level, in the last 4 years, it's almost about $5 billion have been invested in AMR activities around human health. I think it's less than 2% of that 5 billion has been invested in Africa.
Wow.
A lot of the investments are in high income countries. So I looked at Danish data because, you know the link we have to Denmark. I think Denmark's investment was like, for the last 5 years, something like almost $100 million have been invested in the Danish, in Denmark, to deal with antimicrobial resistance. And almost 80% of that investment is Denmark investing in itself. So when you look at the African continent, it's donors investing in Africa. It's not governments investing in their own the research or any of the sectors related to AMR. So there's a disjoint, and I think that's also what Kenneth is trying to say, is that it's heavily subsidized, and we need, actually, one of the things he also mentioned is sustainability. Anything that we have to do has to sustain the life after the project ends, and that can only happen if governments take on the responsibility and themselves invest and sort of show that this is what we are going to do moving forward. And until that happens, you're continuously going to be waiting for donor money in order to be able to implement things and continue for it to be sustainable.
It's like begging. Victoria, as part of the Beninese National Action Plan panelists, you guys probably have some access to the government agencies. Do you have any plans of investing?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's the thing. We have the same problem as Kenneth said, because there is no internal money, internal funds against AMR, but at least from each ministry involved, we advocate for some lines against those topics. So at least, even is small, even is not enough. In each ministry involved, we try to put something in the lines, but it's remain in the line, because when it's come to the practice, it's different. It's a lot of policy, because from my point of view, I think the next step will be the policy. We need some science diplomacy to convince those decision maker that, okay, now we know the situation of AMR and those things, but you need to be involved, because it's a national issue. So you need, as authority, you need to involve yourself, not always be begging, be waiting for external resources. And if our national system is really involved, putting some funds to sustain our national plan, then the researcher from the project, the funders, then the researcher will come and hold it with the national system. Because from my point of view, the situation will be, I don't know, it's just an idea, but you know, we are talking about COVID-19. But what is the post-COVID? Because we are using a lot of antibiotics in those patients. So yeah, we already discussed about it. It's just an idea, but it can be a problem. It can worse the problem. We don't know. I don't have any data to.
It's actually two ways. The issue with COVID is two ways. First, there is the COVID patient. There are COVID patients who are actually given antimicrobials, and
exactly.
this can drive resistance. But on the other side, there's one good information about COVID is that the overall hygiene and all this going on is actually reducing infection. Therefore, this drives a kind of reduced resistance. So it's like a double edge. We'll see is coming up.
So AMR is still there.
Yeah. Sorry.
So, I think we cannot talk about COVID without AMR.
Yeah, sure. I don't want to stop. We have done the allocated time, and I would like you to just give a closing remark. Then I'll ask the other people to also do the same, so we don't end up.
Yeah.
Too much. Yeah.
I think it was a nice session. I was very pleased to meet Ashley and Kenneth. Thank you for joining and shared this moment. I hope we will keep in touch and still hold the flame for the fight against.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, maybe Kenneth, would you like to say something before we finish?
Okay. Thank you, Gildas, for organizing this powerful and good chat. I'm delighted to have met Ashley. Delighted to have met Victorian too. Victorian, I know a lot about Benin. Gildas taught me a lot. Yeah, so thank you so very much. I think in the issue of the antimicrobial resistance, especially the facet of the livestock, I think we need to do much because for us, the veterinarians, our intervention goes to the animals, but it has to be through the human beings who own them, which is sometimes a barrier. So I think we have to invest a lot in sociology, so that we reach out to the human beings who are the owners of the animals and maybe change their behavioral aspect towards this issue of antibiotic misuse. Thank you.
Thanks. I know there is a lot we can talk about. It is AMU, especially in the African context. You can spend even a whole year discussing. You will never finish. So I would just like Ashley to also have a closing remark before we shut down.
Yeah, I just personally want to say thank you, Gildas, for thinking about me and asking me to be a part of this. And I'm really happy to have had a chance to get to meet Kenneth and Victorian. And I'm definitely going to be reaching out to you because I have through my research here at ILRI, I have activities in Benin and as well as in Zambia. So I would love to connect and I think what we need is not to work in a regional, in a country level. I think what we need is that it's not just Zambia, it's not Benin, it's not me in Kenya. It's basically we need to work regional. We need to think about how do we share things regionally. It doesn't make sense that Zambia develops protocols, I develop my own, Victorian is developing his own. We need to be able to work together, talk together, share data, everything. So I'm a fighter and I'm here to fight. So yeah, I can't do it on my own. Everybody has to play a role in it. So, but I'm hopeful. I'm really hopeful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and have a good evening. Bye-bye. We'll just keep it like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, for joining and
Bye-bye.
time. You can now go back to your children.